You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management, archaeology, and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 299 for October 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we talk about your retirement endgame. What does the end of your career look like? So check out your 401k because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. Welcome to the show, everyone. Joining me today is Heather in Southern California.
Hi, everyone.
Bill in Northern California.
Hello.
And Doug in Scotland.
Hey, everyone.
All right. Well, this is kind of my penultimate episode, if you will. Next episode will be my last, episode number 300. I am exiting the show, and I don't know if this is just luck of the draw or what, but I feel like I'm retiring from the episode, and that is sort of the, theme of today's episode. But I think that's just a coincidence. But Doug, why don't you go ahead and introduce the topic for today?
Yeah, real quick first, Berkeley, isn't that like Central California, or is that really considered Northern California?
I'm new to California, so I never know where the line is. They're just like, there's LA, and then everything north of that is Northern California. You're like, whoa, okay, really? Because there's still 300 miles of state above, above. Where's the line?
There's Southern California. Central Coast, I think, starts near northern Santa Barbara, and then you have Central Coast, which and then you have northern. And I think Central Coast probably, it's not that big though. It kind of goes up to maybe, San Jose.
Well, and Bay Area is kind of its own thing, isn't it? Yeah. Isn't Bay Area just kind of like the Bay Area? It's not really northern, central. It's just the Bay Area.
Yeah, and while Heather was explaining it, I was also like Googling a map of California to see where Santa Barbara is. Because when you live in the Bay Area, you don't know anything. Like, you don't know where anything's at. It's like, I think outside of here somewhere is San Diego and Disneyland. That's it. And Yosemite's close to New York. It's like over there.
Right. And wine. Somewhere outside is wine.
People are like, I live somewhere. I'm like using my phone. Where's that? Is that in California? Yeah, it is.
Nice. All right, Doug, what are we talking about?
Well, obviously it's not a geography lesson this time, but yeah. So we're talking about the end game for people. So, there's two versions of that. We'll probably hit in the first segment. The first one is, what's you guys' sort of career end games? What are you looking at to sort of, your end of your career, or, where are you topping out at, or how are you planning on ending your career, as it were? And so that'll be our first topic. And then the next one will be after that is, retirement. After your career is over, how are you going about preparing for retirement? And no one's allowed to do the cop out of, we'll never retire. Yeah, everyone, you're going to have to retire at some point or die, one or the other. But it's that conversation and how you do that in archaeology. So I'll throw it out to you guys first. Well, Chris, since you're not going to be with us very much longer, and you've slightly sort of moved a bit out of archaeology, it'd be interesting to hear. Yeah, what's your plans for the next 20-ish years of your career left, or you plan to retire sooner than that? Is that why you're leaving archaeology?
Well, here's the thing. I was always, let me back up. When I was in the Navy, I had some wise words from a division chief who he told me something that I've thought about, like literally everywhere I've gone, everything I've done for the rest of my life. Like ever since I was 18 years old, when he first told me this, he said, look at the people who are doing the thing that you would be doing in whatever job you're doing right now. Look at where they're at, where you would be in 20 years, and ask yourself if that's where you want to be. And it is amazing advice when you sit and think about it. If you're just sitting there in an archaeology job right now and you're looking at the people that have been doing the thing that you're doing right now, and they've been there for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, they're at the end of their career, ask yourself if that's who you want to be. Ask if that's where you want to be. And I'll tell you what, Most of the time, the answer is no. That's not where I want to be. and that's, I've always looked at the archaeology lifestyle and profession and just like all the opportunities that you could do as an archaeologist, right? Not just CRM, not just all the stuff in CRM, but like, what are all the opportunities that could be presented to you? And the things that I was attracted to were always like teaching, but I don't have the credentials to be a professor. I'd have to go back and get a doctorate, probably something like that, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but and I'm going to be 50 next year in April. But a lot of my professors in college were just fresh out of their doctorate and they were in their 50s, right? So that's not out of the realm of possibility. But, I don't see myself in CRM in a retirement capacity. It's just not a career that interests me in a retirement age setting. You know what I mean? CRM is for, I feel like, the younger, the first part of your career, whether you're young actually or the young from a career sense. If you came to CRM late in your career, like I did, I started in my 30s, late 20s, early 30s. I feel like that was the young part of my career, right? Young not from an age standpoint, but from a career standpoint. So I did it. I did it for 15 years, right? Got a master's degree, did that whole thing. Ran projects, ran $500,000 $1 million projects. I'm fine. I wrote reports. I led projects. I had crews, had employees, still have some employees, do stuff. And then I started looking around and saying, this isn't really what I want to do. So what else can I do? And that's when the podcasting stuff was really, interesting me, the educational aspect that I could do. And that's when I really kind of jumped into the Archaeology Podcast Network. Now, that's not really making any money, right? I mean, it does make some money, but it doesn't make enough money to even support its own self, right? It's spending more money than it's making, which is fine because I can support it with my other work. So, but someday it might make money, right? If we can continue this thing to keep it going. And we have a number of really good volunteers, and some of them are getting paid. Some of them are paid like stipend type positions. So that's really cool that we're able to do that kind of thing. But that's really what I enjoy doing. And if I can keep the Archaeology Podcast Network going, and if I can keep that educational side of things going, we have a lot more things that we want to do. We've just launched 4 more new shows in the last month and a half. We want to launch more shows every 6 months or so. If we can, hopefully my editor's not listening to this because I'm going to have to buy a new editor. She's going to reach over and slap me in the face if she heard this. But if we can keep that going, and then some of the other educational things we want to do, and really keep the teaching and education, not just educating archaeologists, but educating other people, teaching the world about archaeology through this medium. That's really what I like. That's what I want to do. And I think that's what retirement means for me, is just keeping something like this going. And whether or not that actually makes money, I might have to keep doing something else, but I don't know. Retirement doesn't always mean you're living off money you made before. It just means, are you happy and can you eat and sleep and not have to do it on the street? That's kind of how I see retirement. So that's what it means for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're already a nomad anyway, right? So
right. I already live in my car.
We know you're not going to be on the street. Yeah, you live in your car. So we already know that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad this came up. I wish I had done the calculations in advance, because pretty much I spend almost every single day waiting to retire. With every faculty meeting, with every engagement with my colleagues, with every single thing, every protest and every single strike, I pretty much am ready to retire, and, there's a couple of things. I have a family and everything. So just walking away without something prepared in advance, that's not a possibility. I owe student loans that could be forgiven, if everything works out well, and I work for the government. So, that's definitely a piece of it. And I actually work in a job that has a pension plan, which is beyond unique. So, for me, I'm just kind of like looking at the hourglass, and just like Chris was saying, I do not want to be anything like the people who have been here for decades. I mean, I'm talking about across the entire university. I do not want to be like the people who have been here, in their 60s. I do not want to be anywhere near a university as far as being a professor when I'm that old. There's no way. And I'm just trying to find some kind of pathway out. I also have come back around to the whole blogging thing for just mental health, but also some kind of way to express myself and to connect with other people outside of here. Because when you're there, like, I mean, you said something about being a professor. I would, there's a certain kind of person who really should be a professor. And I don't think, you're really cut out for it, Chris. I don't know what to say. Like, I don't think you'd put up with the stuff. I don't think you'd put up with it, and I don't want to characterize anyone who, wants to become a professor or whatever. But when you get in here, you'll see that there is a certain kind of person that is cut out to be a professor. And I always feel like I'm the, oddball. I'm out in the corner, right? Like, every one of my ideas, even though at a company it would be entertained and probably turn things around and make profit, is seen as like, an idiotic statement. Why would you say that? And I'm like, because I'm thinking about this from a business perspective, and you're thinking about it from some kind of weird, belly full of laced Kool-Aid perspective, that you don't see the actual world and the financial game that's going on here on campus. And so, I'm always out in the cold.
It's good for you to say that, Bill, because everybody has this romantic view of college professorship that's given to them by movies, right? It's not all walking around the Ivy halls, right? And with students and around, it's politics, right? Like,
there's literally a granite tower. There is actually, in fact, a granite ivory colored tower here at the place where I work. It's the tallest thing on campus. You can see it from miles away.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would have fun standing in front of a classroom full of students teaching a class. It's all the bullshit outside of that 50 minutes that would suck, right?
Well, and it's also the dirty, rotten core of academia in general. Yeah. People are coming to improve their lives, and the university system is eating them. Right? Like charging these exorbitant fees, constantly figuring out room for growth. Like, why would a university be aimed towards growth? Like, why was growth a thing for a university? Like, why are there investment bonds in public universities, right? It's so that they can be run like businesses. And so people show up and they want to learn, but then also there's nothing to actually compel any instructor to really teach you job skills. And so there will be some who will teach you some things that you can use in a career, or they'll be thinking about the fact that you're not going to be an archaeologist, that you're going to be doing something else, right? So like, there are some who will think that way, but the majority are just so caught up in their own ideas and plans and other things, that they just can't even talk to you as a human. Like, they're not able. They never worked in their lives before in industries anyway, so there's no way they can really teach you. And then finally, like, there's also a certain level of like unpaid service that's absolutely accepted at the university level. Like, they just accept that when they pay you salary, you won't sleep, that you'll do all this extra work. Meanwhile, the people at the very top get paid, $500,000, 1 point something million. You're getting paid enough to barely scrape by, and you're supposed to work all day and all night. Right. So I would just say, like, academia, it is what it is. It's a job just like everything else. Give them 9 to 5, and the rest of it can just, go in the waste bin, and count your pennies till retirement.
So for any new listeners, Bill recently got tenure, and thus
is
now able to have conversations like this.
All the episodes before this, I kept my mouth shut, but now that it's official, I can actually tell you a little bit about the reality of working in academia.
Oh my God. All right. Well, on that cheery note, let's take a break. Go get a drink. It's 9:30 in the morning for these guys. I think they need a drink by now, except for Doug, who can, it's the evening. But anyway, let's take a break. We'll be back and see what Heather and Doug think about this on the other side. Back in a minute.
Bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.
Welcome back to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 299, and we're talking about your retirement endgame. So, Heather, I know you had some comments at the end of the last segment, so let's see what you think about all this.
Chris, we just talked about throwing to Bill real quick to see his end, and then Heather.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
We literally, like, less than a minute ago, had this conversation.
I don't even know. I'm just a short timer now at this point. So
he's gone.
Yeah.
So as Bill desperately pulls an Indiana Jones, is running out of Berkeley with a rolling boulder behind him. Where's that plane that's going to pick you up and take you away, Bill? What's your sort of end game?
Yeah. So, I mean, I plan on I guess the plan is, first of all, pay off debt, because I owe a lot for my student loan still. So, when those are forgiven, then that's, a huge weight off my back. My daughter's in 6th grade right now, so I still have several years of her going through school and everything. My son is just starting high school. So those guys are moving through their thing. And I just kind of want to keep it flowing, do my best and keep doing what I've been doing, do a good job until those guys are out of school and my student loans are forgiven or paid off. And then I think, I'll still have a few more years before I'm eligible for early retirement. And so the idea is just to really kind of pay off debt and to, get something else going, in the summers on the side that can grow into a career where part of my bills are covered and my healthcare is covered by my pension. And then I get another job, and the other job, could be more cultural resources. I've also thought about, once my kids are adults, then it's not the same thing that I have to be here all the time. And my wife works fully remote right now. So, we've thought about doing things like doing history tours and tours around the world, going and living in other countries. I can still teach. I'll teach online still for several universities. They pay by the class. And so that can always supplement some income. And so basically just, around 55 or so, start thinking about just, turning it down. Keep doing archaeology, but just on my terms then, not necessarily worrying so much about, like, if I'm a PI and I get laid off, then whatever. Because I'll have several different jobs, right?
Right.
Cool.
Okay.
Heather, I imagine since you don't have tenure, you're going to have a slightly different conversation. But what's your end game?
Wow. It's funny because I believe in the same tenet that Chris mentioned with, look at where you're at right now. Look at the people that are at least touted as being, 15 years, 20 years ahead of you, even 10 years ahead of you. And is that where you want to be? I do believe that tenet, but I think that you need to be take some license with it. And I've done that throughout my career. So I haven't just looked at, like, if I looked at somebody and I saw them, they have been doing it for 15 years, I would look at that and say, is that something I want? But I would also then say, how could I change that for myself? Like, is that really my future? Right. And so then I would look at, which I think Chris has done with his own career. Right. And it isn't that I would look at it and say, okay, no, I don't want CRM because this is what I think's ahead of me. I would say, okay, if I still want to stay in CRM, what do I have to do in order for that 15-year look ahead to be something I really want to strive for? And so it's a little different when you're at a larger company or an environmental firm. You're not just in CRM. And so if you are working currently, for the listeners, in just a CRM firm, for some people that look ahead, somebody who's been there a lot longer than you, looks good. That's what you want. But if it doesn't, don't let it dissuade you from staying in CRM, because there's different versions of CRM. You can have CRM within a larger environmental company. And I think sometimes it gets a bad rap when it really isn't always the truth. So, for me personally, I looked at it and said, okay, yes, I want to be an archaeologist. I do want to stay in CRM, but what are some aspects that I want to now start focusing on? What do I enjoy? And for me, that is what has helped me progress in my career and that's how I look at what my next steps ahead and my end game is. And for me, my end game is more from the business perspective and taking CRM to new innovative spots, right? Maybe not even areas that are, that people are seeing regularly in CRM at all. And so my end game is that I would like to finish my career knowing that I made a significant impact on CRM in general. And as far as monetarily goes, just continue to make sure that I pay off the debt that I have, stay debt free. And then every time, the one thing that I think is helpful just from a financial perspective, if you get promoted and you get a significant bump, the first thing you need to do is pay off your debt with that significant bump. Assume you still are being paid what you were paid before. And I know this is basic, but I think people need to be reminded of it. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for you to retire when you want to. And while you're young and still able to go and have fun with your free time. So, every time you get promoted, do an assessment. What I was getting paid before, what can I do with this extra chunk of money? And number one, it should go to debt. Number two, it should go to savings and investment, and 3 into investments. And so that's what I've done. Every time I'm being bumped up, I get paid more money. I'm focusing on those 3 things, setting myself up so that when it does get to that time where I'm ready to retire, that I can do that. Anybody who really knows me well knows I will probably never fully retire. I'm not somebody who's just not in me. I have to engage and be engaged in some kind of, new endeavor. And so what that will look like, I have an idea now of what it might look like, but it will change. My career, how I started in my career is totally different. That's another thing that I would say to people is just be willing to adjust your goals and your desires, because as you progress in your career, you'll be introduced to some other things that you would never even dreamed of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably sort of the name of the game with this field to begin with, is keeping your opportunities open. You know what I mean? You never know what's going to come down the line. You might even think, hey, as I'm getting out of college or something like that, I have an exact idea of what this means to be an archaeologist and what my career looks like. But that is 100% going to change probably every year you're in archaeology for the first 5 years, maybe even 10 years. And who knows, maybe you're not even going to be in archaeology in 10 years. And don't let that scare you, because that might actually be a good thing. You know what I mean? Because you have to keep your opportunities and your idea for what an opportunity even means open. And that opportunity might even be getting out of archaeology. Like the current thing I'm doing right now, that's paying all my bills and paying me probably 10 times what I ever got paid in archaeology. And it's not about money. It's definitely not about money, but I really, really, really enjoy what I'm doing right now, right? The thing that is paying all my bills, affording me the lifestyle that I'm doing right now, and allowing my wife and I to do what we're doing, and incidentally funding our ability to do the Archaeology Podcast Network right now, is also incredibly challenging work. I really enjoy the problem solving aspect of it. It's a really challenging thing, and that's why I like it. It's not just something I'm doing to make money. You know what I mean? And it's like some soul sucking sort of deal. If it was, I wouldn't be doing it, honestly. But I like doing it. What is that,
Chris?
Yeah.
What is it?
Ultimately it's software implementation, which doesn't sound very exciting, but it's this safety software implementation thing. And I'm dealing with clients from around the world, and it's long-term implementations where I work with them on a weekly basis to take their requirements and develop this software with them and teach them how to use it and teach them how to implement it and solve problems. They say, hey, we want to do this. And I'm like, great, let's see if we can do it. And let's build something together and teach them how to do it. And it's pretty great. And I actually take a lot of what I learned in archaeology, usually working on mine sites and different things like that, and going through safety orientation classes and all these different things is incredibly helpful to help speak the same language, because it's very safety oriented software, although we build lots of different things. But I kind of fell backwards into it because of being in archaeology too, because of my experience with digital archaeology and working with WildNote and Codify and different things. I had those software implementation and development skills that sort of had me fall backwards into this thing, where I met a guy working in my co-working space in Reno, and then I just kind of started doing more and more of this, and turns out it pays ridiculously well, and I enjoy it, right? Nice. And I can do it from anywhere. So it's paying for basically everything that we do. and it's really fun. And I've turned a side business out of this thing. I've got a side business working with clients who have gone, we say, go live after their implementation is over. I've got what I call a post go live service with these clients because the company just simply kind of turns them loose after they're live and doesn't have any support for them afterwards. So I created a support company for them, and now I'm doing that too. So I really enjoy it. So. But like I said, who knew that opportunity existed 5 years ago?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that about, not knowing where your trail is going to lead, because, I didn't think I'd have the job that I have either. And folks who are listening, while I did say stuff about higher education, it's never going to get better unless people from CRM get PhDs and get hired in tenure track positions, right? Because I'm starting to realize that CRM will continue saying that they want people to be trained and they want all this other stuff, but they're perfectly happy, in my experience, to just keep training people on the job because no one's willing to actually put the money and the time and the effort into getting university programs to train people to do cultural resources, right? So overall, thousands of people end up graduating without even knowing what CRM is every single year. And they've been talking about that since 1966. So it's not like CRM is going to come in and actually do the teaching. So if people who have done cultural resources don't show up and go into academia and teach students how to do archaeology, then it's not going to happen, right? Because there's no incentive for universities to change. We've talked about this many times either. And I think now CRM companies are kind of interested, but I still haven't seen a check come out. I haven't seen a single person actually start, en masse coordinating with, the SHA, the SAA or something like that to train people. And so it's just more sound and not a lot of people moving after it. And I've been working on this for a very long time, right? So I encourage people who are listening, go ahead, get a PhD, because the time you're doing your PhD is the most freedom as far as research that you'll ever do. It's the purest archaeology that you're ever going to do because no one's telling you no. And if you can prove it and you can figure out a way to pay for it, you can go ahead and do it. And then once you finish, if you go back to CRM, you already have experience in CRM anyway. So, you're going to be just able to reach the higher levels of management. And if if all the stars align, you get to work in academia, then it's your job to train the next generation. You're going to be the one who's teaching people how to do archaeology.
I just to follow up on that, as part of the issue with that, I understand where you're going with that, Bill, but part of the issue with CRM, just from my perspective, is that, in order to be companies to be giving money and saying, okay, let's get together, because we've talked about this before. I think it's a great idea. I think the professional side of archaeology and the academic side of archaeology needs to get together, and there needs to be a good path forward for appropriate education to enter into CRM. But the thing is that, as you stated before in the previous segment, the universities have a very specific way of doing things, and whether or not they're going to be open. So let's say I'm CRM company AAA, and I'm willing to give $1 million to a university to set up a program. Obviously money talks, right? So maybe I'm only willing to give $100,000 to set up a program. Is it going to be set up in the way that it really needs to be set up for CRM? Because we've seen CRM programs open up, and they still don't provide the information, because you have people that are teaching it don't know anything about CRM.
Yes, it cannot go to a university, right? Like we can only do so much, and it can't just be CRM getting untrained people, right? There's got to be a different way. I have a better idea, but we're talking about retirement, and it's
right. And so I just wanted to do a follow-up, comment on that, and I do think that this is worthy of another episode, which we can cover then. But in the meantime,
I think we'll take it to break. See you guys on the other side.
Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply at lifemd.com. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
If you've struggled for years to lose weight and have given up hope, did you know you can now access GLP-1 prescription medications through LifeMD? LifeMD is now offering eligible patients online access to GLP-1s, the breakthrough prescription medication that can help you lose body fat and weight. Listen to what people are saying.
I've been able to live my normal lifestyle, and I've lost 20 pounds already. It changed my life.
I wasn't expecting it to shut off the food noise. This was life-altering, and if I can do it, I feel like anybody can do it.
And here's the best part. Your insurance may cover 100% of the cost of your medication. So go to TryLifeMD.com to have your eligibility checked right now. Get started today at TryLifeMD.com. That's TryLifeMD.com.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.
Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts for the power, performance, and reliability of a new Super Start battery. Visit O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
All right, guys, welcome back to episode 299 of the CRM podcast. Chris's penultimate episode, though we come in with sort of two topics. As it stands, we're going to have to split this off into another episode. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure Chris will be here for what we talk about this joke is like, oh, guys, it's the 400th episode. This is going to be Chris's last. So I think with this one, we're gonna have to split out the topic. We got, as usual, too ambitious. I'm going to talk about, wealth management and how to actually be able to retire on a CRM, wages and all that sort of stuff. We'll probably have to do another episode for that. So we'll just continue with the topic we have on hand and do that as a different episode. Heather, I actually had a question about something you said, sort of, with your sort of career end goals. You sort of mentioned you wanted to make a difference in CRM. Do you have an idea of what that's going to be, or what you'd want it to be?
Well, I think it's going to change over time. I would like, as a ideal, to eventually get away from the predominant model of as needed staff. And I think that the way to do that, in just a cursory overview, is to be much more intentional about the roles of the staff that you have on board, identifying what roles really do need to be done by degreed archaeologists and what don't. And I think part of the problem with the as needed model, there's many problems with the as needed model. There's some benefits to it too, but unfortunately it's kind of gotten out of control, where a majority of the staff is as needed. And that's just not sustainable for anybody for a long period of time. It's extremely stressful for people that are working as needed, because they don't know. It's just they're at the mercy, right, of various different companies. And so that is one model, is to do that, to revolutionize how CRM is looked at from a business perspective, and to not just have it be, and I think we're already making headway with this. There are some other companies that are doing pretty well with it, although some of them are, unfortunately, the business side is that they're not paying their people as well as they should. And I won't name those companies. I think people know who they are. But I think that people that are in a position to do so need to really look at CRM completely differently, and to start really creating roles for people from not just an archaeology side, but a business side. And I think it's difficult to do just if you're only a CRM company, but I think it is possible. And then also this idea, this concept that cultural resources is just something that has to be, that's forced upon a project. In some ways that is true, but CRM has the capability of bringing in a lot more work for a larger engineering or environmental firm. They're not, if you have a CRM group or practice within an environmental company that is just relying on the larger company to bring them work, they're doing it wrong. CRM has just as much of a capacity or a capability to bring in work to the other disciplines as it is the other way around, as they can bring to CRM. And so I just think that that's, for me, it's more from the business perspective. and building CRM as a practice that isn't just servicing the internal client, but is actively pursuing the external clients and is a revenue generator for a larger company.
So before you head off to retirement, you want to burn it all down and rebuild it.
Rebuild it.
Rebuild it.
Yeah, come on, rebuild it, dude.
I mean, Heather, man, that is cool.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool ambition.
Yeah. Use the blocks to build a new building.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other sort of question I have for everyone is, because we've talked about this and you guys have all been saying, like, you know, your career goals change. I think Chris or Bill said it changes yearly. I think for some people it may change like daily or hourly. And for others, you know, it could take, you know, a couple of years. But I was just wondering, what's your career goals and how have they changed? And can you remember back to like some of the other ones you had in the past and, you know, what you want to do and maybe 10 years ago and how that's changed? I'm not sure if Bill has a different comment or is going to be the first one to jump in on that. So I'll throw into Bill.
I will jump in. I'm glad that you mentioned, 10 years ago, right? Because 10 years ago, I was still on this show, but I think I was going into college, right? So I was just going back for a PhD and I had 2 kids and a mortgage and all this other stuff. And I didn't know if it was going to work out. And I was like, well, I'll just go back to school and I'll weather out the last wake of the recession. And then when I'm done, I'll have a PhD and I'll be doing CRM and I will have done it for 10 years. But I think stuff has changed quite a bit for me. And I, was just talking about retiring, but also, one of the things that I've realized is that by doing community archaeology so much, there's a lot of communities out there that they didn't know the heritage that was in that town and they didn't know that there was different groups that live there, right? So there's that. And then there's a lot of people who have been overlooked for a long time and no one ever connected with their heritage or ever, made any kind of historic memorial to the past of the people who used to live there. So I think in that process of feeling like you're forgotten or being asked to forget things or being denied a chance to remember, that a lot of people have a complicated history with the past. And I think in a lot of ways, this gets distorted in the media and it gets used by all different kinds of groups, politicians, businesses. They create this heritage thing that they then feed to us and then, we eat it. And because we're not actually wise enough about our own history and our own past or the way archaeology works, it's very easy for us to believe not true things or for myths to be perpetuated. And I think, going forward, I'd really like to, use the flexibility that I get from being a professor to provide a pathway for people to connect with these past and to try to work through some of the, harm and, just the pain that comes from being forgotten or being asked to forget things in a kind of positive way, right? Like folks don't know also I've been, meditating for a long time. I've been, connected with a lot of different traditional folks that have other traditional practices and stuff. And I think that there's a lot there that can really help folks work through problems that they're having in their life that they may not be understanding, that it's like, you are the way you are because your grandparents and your parents and other people were, pushing you to do these certain things. And now you're in a place where you kind of don't really realize where those ideas came from or why you feel that way or, why you would do that to other people. And I feel like, kind of going back, reading the story in reverse of your life and of your family's history, that's a pathway for people to kind of realize oh, well, I don't need to do that anymore because they went through it so that I don't have to go through it. And in the process, go to these different sites and go to these different places and, kind of try to connect in a different way to great grandparents and other folks that have gone on, because you're at the place and you can see the neighborhood and you can see the farm and the landscape where they were once at. And maybe that'll help people make more sense of their life today in the present. And so that's definitely something I'm going to keep trying to do. I've been doing for a while now. And in retirement, I just plan on doing less meetings and gibberish and more communities and being mindful and being out in places.
Nice. And Heather, we sort of touched on this in your sort of origin story episode, which I I'm sorry, Chris, I'm not being a good podcast host where I could like point people to that one and be like, yeah, guys, go listen to episode whatever. Just go back to our archives. But, Heather, at one point, you've had multiple careers. You were looking at sort of the upper echelons of hockey refereeing and stuff, and then you've changed. So I know you've sort of changed your career goals. Do you mind touching on a few of those as well over the years?
Sure. I think, it's funny because they've just transitioned organically for me. And then also there's been demarcations in my life, like having children and focusing on that kind of also were this natural, transition to the next career. And so without, going into great detail, I think the one thing is that, what I did with hockey officiating, that really ended because getting pregnant with my first child, my son, and then having to make a decision on and this is what happens in archaeology too. Is this conducive to me being the mother I want to be? And so I had to make that decision, and I'm still involved with hockey. It's just, I'm not involved in that, in that manner. So, but I've taken all these things that I've learned in hockey, because anybody who's been out in the field will definitely attest to the fact that you have to have a strong constitution. You have to be able to, stand up for what is right. And you have to be able to do it in a diplomatic way, because you have all these, stakeholders, all these people that are involved. You can't alienate for that project or for future projects. And so learning what I did in hockey as an official at a high level really helped me be a better archaeologist. And it's actually helped me shift into more of the business side. And so then my other careers, it's the same thing. So I've taken bits and pieces from experiences in life, and I've then moved that to benefit me in this career. And the same thing, you can do that from inside of a career. So there's different roles that I've had in CRM. I've taken those different roles and the things that I've learned and the skills that I've acquired, and I've shifted those over. And then also constantly trying to look at things from a different perspective. So I don't know if that helps, that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess I'll throw it to Chris for the last bit. Maybe your sergeant or commander ruined this for you when you were 18, but like when you went to the military, were you thinking about career military? And then like when you were at the beginning of your CRM career, were you thinking like career CRM? And have you changed a lot over the years?
I mean, yeah, because I don't really go into anything without thinking about it sort of being a career, honestly, which kind of tells you how much things change, right? Because I did go to the military thinking I was going to retire. In fact, I went in and I had plans of, I had really crappy, let's be honest, parents and guidance counselors. I didn't know anything about college, about going into college. I didn't think I could go to college ever. I didn't think we had the money, the grades, the whatever, right? So I went into the military. And then when I got into the military, I tried to get into the Naval Academy kind of through a back door. And my lieutenant in my squadron kind of screwed that up for me. So that didn't work, because I wanted to go down the officer route and make that work and do a career out of that. And it just never happened. And I also wanted to fly. And I actually ended up getting out of the military really only because I got and I've talked about this, I think, on the podcast a long time ago, but I got a sort of a random phone call from a school in Oklahoma called Spartan School of Aeronautics that basically was a flight school, like a tech school for pilots, commercial pilots. And I ended up going there and getting out of the Navy a year and a half early from my 6-year tour. I was on a 4-year tour with a 2-year extension. And I got out a year and a half early, which they were offering early outs at the time. It was during the Clinton era. And I got out and went there and ended up transferring to the University of North Dakota, where they had a much better flying program, and did a whole bunch of commercial flying certificates and things like that. But then kind of ended up dropping aviation and going into archaeology. So that's how I got into that. And because archaeology was always my first passion. So, but all along the way, I was like, well, I'm going to be career military. And then I was like, well, I'm going to be a commercial airline pilot. And I just want to go up through the ranks there. And then when I got into archaeology and learned about CRM, I was like, great. Well, I want to, own a company, and, you know, that was like my career goal there. But to do that, you have to get a master's degree and do that. So I went and got a master's degree at some point and did that and owned a company and ran projects and figured, well, now I've done that. Now what? Right. It's kind of like once I owned a company and had a master's degree, I'm like, what am I going to do this for the next 30 years? Like where am I going to go from here? Right. I really did kind of think that. And it was like, what, is it just going to own bigger company? like what does that look like? I actually kind of knew a few people in California that were at the end of their careers that had owned companies for a really long time. Some of those people that started back in the late 70s, early 80s and owned a company, and the company went to 40, 50 people and then down to, 15, 5 people and then back up to 30 people and down to 5 people. I'm like, I really don't want to play that game, right? Where you just ebb and flow with the work and the cycles and the economy. And like, what is that? Right. And you're the one person, the constant that just stays there, like one of those time travel movies where you sit there and everything changes around you for 4 decades. And I just didn't really want that to be me. So I was just constantly looking, like I said earlier in the segments, for those opportunities around me and not saying no to them, and constantly starting new things like the Archaeology Podcast Network and my podcasting business. And now this new thing with the software implementation and then the new side business off of that. So like Heather said, never really staying still and just kind of always looking for opportunities. So I don't really know where this thing is going. I don't see the software implementation being forever either by any means. I think my retirement game is to just kind of be a serial business owner and to have multiple streams of income. I think that's what it is. So we'll see how that goes. Probably going to kill me is what it's going to do.
Heather, you get the honor of the last comment for the episode. I always say that, and then you're going to say something, and then we're all going to jump in. And
no, this is it.
Chris is going to be yelling in the background, "Wrap it up, guys! Wrap it up! I promise. We need to wrap it after this last comment." And that was like 10 minutes ago.
Okay, so mine was just, there is so much opportunity. Don't give up on CRM. It makes me really sad. I say this all the time. I see it on social media a lot. Don't settle for what people are telling you CRM is. Don't even settle for what you perceive it to be now. You can make an impact. You can definitely make this a good job and a well-paying career, and a career where you can actually make a difference in the world. And just don't buy what so many are saying is that this, that you have to put up with the, what everybody perceives as this poverty mindset, right? So just, it can be better, and you can be part of the solution, and go for it.
Wow. It's rare that we end on a positive note for the podcast. So well done, Heather, there. And thank you to the listeners in the field. Oh, I've now forgotten. Chris has said this 300 times, but this is why I always throw out to Chris, because he has it. It's thank you for listening in the field, something, and we're going to see you.
Not even the right time to do it. You just do it.
I was just jumping in there, Chris. But I'll do what I do best and just go goodbye. Out of order, right out of order. So I'll leave it to Chris to give us the outro.
We're ensuring that you want to leave, Chris.
It's not a problem. Not a problem. All right.
Validating your decision.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll see everybody next time. All right. And next time is going to be our 300th episode, so don't miss that one. All right. See everybody next week. That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/CRM Arc Podcast. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for the episode. You can also email me at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website. please share the link to the show wherever you saw it. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Also, please consider donating to the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
See, there it is. That was it. That was the outro.
That was it.
That's what I was looking for. I messed it up. I'm sorry, Chris.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Culturo Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.